I am here with Jordan Drake again of DP Review TV. Hey, Jordan.
Hey, twice in a month. This is big for me.
Yeah, I know. Well, this is a bit of a bonus episode. You know, the next podcast episode is 100. So I felt like this isn't a big enough deal to waste.
It's got to be 99 and a half. Yeah, you don't want this to
this
be.
is a half episode. This will, probably just go on the YouTube channel. But I did want to talk a little bit about video cameras going into 2021. Obviously, 2020 was like one of the biggest years for announcements ever. I want to circle back on the state of where are we with video cameras? Like, what did we get? What are we still waiting for? What could we even hope for coming up? And just like, what can we recommend to people? That was part of it. So let's start there. Like at the entry level, first of all, we'll spend a little more time, I think, on the professional level, but to start off with, like people that are just kind of, getting their first good video camera, for example, what are some of the best cameras that you saw come out in 2020, and like what do you recommend to people for next year?
Well, for entry level, I mean, last year was a really big year for kind of the higher end, the stuff we talked about in our best and worst, like the full frame cameras, things like that. The big standout for me that came out for people getting started, and I know you got your hands on it as well, was that Sony ZV1, kind of a dedicated vlogging YouTuber camera, which
sure.
I think when it first came out, I was like, this is doing a pretty good job. There's definitely a few drawbacks to it. And then Panasonic brought out their G100 version of a vlogging camera. And I said, like, this Sony is amazing, because it really did do a better job of checking those boxes for people first getting started. You don't need to learn a lot of technique. It's got great autofocus. That product showcase feature, I believe you tested as well, is so good for what so many people are doing on YouTube, just holding things up and talking about them. The built-in preamps were really nice on it. It was just a good, well-rounded camera, and no record limit. When you told me we were going to talk about some good entry-level cameras, I was trying to whittle it down to ones that don't have a record limit, and it's a pretty small list. So that's why that one kind of jumped right up to the top. What did you think of it?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the point that we're at now, where it's like there are cameras that excel in every single category. You've got the dynamic range, you've got the no limits, you've got every, the 4K, like all of the different features are checked off somewhere. It's just like, how can you get as many of them into one bundle as possible? There are things happening even in the lower end cameras like that Sony, not lower end, but more affordable, like the product autofocus, where that's not, you don't think about that as being like a premium feature. Like professionals would never think like, oh, why would I want my autofocus to act kind of weird and not prioritize what you always have prioritized in the past? But all of a sudden you realize like, wait a minute, when most people, like when I'm doing this all the time, like what's my camera going to do? Okay.
It got there.
I forced it to get there. But a lot of the time it will not do what you're actually trying to do, which is like, okay, just focus on the thing closest to the lens.
Yeah.
So in those cases, it's not about like adding quality to the camera. It's about thinking about how people are using them. And I think Sony really excelled at that with the ZV1. I hesitate to say it one way or the other because I don't want to...
you don't want to wade into those waters. We just reviewed a lot of Nikon cameras.
Pronunciation. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We're alienating everyone.
But so is that did that end up being the top choice for entry level stuff?
It really did for 2020. Because when I was looking at it, so much of what I really recommend are slightly older models that have really come down in price. I was just taking a look around on B&H, and like the Canon M50, if you want to do 1080, I know everybody's got it, but it is just such a nice, easy to use, intuitive little camera. The 4K is unusable on it. It's got a big crop. You lose your dual pixel autofocus. But if you keep it in 1080, it's a great little camera. And the other one that jumped out at me is I hadn't looked in a while in how low prices have gotten on the Panasonic GH4, because I was going to recommend the G95. Right. Which is kind of their new, their current mid-range kind of camera.
$700 on B&H.
Yeah, and I would say that's a better video camera than that G95 that's available. You get unlimited record time, battery life's amazing. You don't get a stabilizer on it, but great preamps. Like it's a workhorse. So much has been done on those cameras. It's not great in low light, and the autofocus is bad. But
So
if you're not falling back
case,
on that.
if I was looking for something to do this, basically this kind of setup permanently, like let's say I always wanted one camera that like sits at home and it's like ready to stream, it's ready to do YouTube stuff. I'm not going to bring it on set. This is my, it lives on a tripod ready to go at any moment. Is like, could that kind of be a top recommendation? Because I want to spend very little on it, but I want it to look amazing. Does getting a GH4, I mean, like such an old camera, does that make sense right now?
I think it totally does. Yeah, if you're not moving around a lot, just manually focus at where you're roughly going to be sitting. It's a micro four thirds sensor, so your depth of field's not insanely shallow anyways. And it's just so dependable. Good color out of it. I think it makes a lot of sense. If you are going to be doing the product waving that you mentioned, that's where I would say the Sony ZV1 would be far and away my top pick right now.
Right, for sure. Yeah, I mean, what a boring answer, though, to say how many year old camera. But it works. Yeah, I mean, like getting the job done is what matters. I also still think about some of the Blackmagics for this. Like, obviously, they had, what are the name of those like little balls? the small Blackmagics that...
Oh, the little micro studio cameras. Yeah.
Yes, I loved that idea, and I feel like nobody really followed up on it. There wasn't any real competition to it. But they were what? Like under $1,000. Oh, okay. They're actually 1,300 right now. The design just totally makes sense for that kind of thing. And it never took off in the way I thought maybe it would. I thought maybe we'd see people like have big, like tons of multicams in their home studios. I don't know. It would make sense for it, but it didn't really happen. And we haven't seen that follow up in 2020. So
it's kind of funny. My friends, the Northrops, wound up setting up a micro studio setup. And eventually they just let it go and set up a bunch of full frame Canon cameras for the autofocus. If it's locked off, it's great to have those little micro ones. I've heard they're very reliable, and the color is great on those cameras. The closest thing I can think of is actually that new Panasonic BGH1, which I used as a webcam when I had it, and it was just fantastic for that. And it's using Panasonic's new version of autofocus, which I'm actually using on the S1H right now, and it is much better. It's a lot less wobble. You're not going to get that on any of the older Micro Four Thirds cameras, except for that new BGH1. So that might really be something worth looking at. But it is a big price premium. I think it was around $2,000. Yeah, $2,000 US for one of those guys. But the image on that is just beautiful. I really did miss it when I had to ship that guy back.
Well, and something we were discovering as we warmed up for this is like, I'm recording on the C200 right now and you are on the SH1. And I've always kind of mistrusted Panasonics because their reputation for autofocus, like they've had enough problems that I worry about it. But on our angles that we're recording right now, like mine was hunting because I'm wearing thick ring glasses and the Canons don't like that. They don't see it as a face anymore, which is very weird interpretation of human faces. But it was losing focus on me, and yours was sticking. Well, you're not wearing thick rim glasses, so not a fair comparison. Anyway,
try.
It's just this moment.
I don't know a way to simulate that effectively. For
it was
a fair
moment
test.
though where all of a sudden, the Panasonic was doing better for the Canon. I'm like, oh, well, that's new to me, but like that's good news because I want Panasonic to not be like a big compromise, which to me it always seemed like it was. Like I was like, I just can't even look at them because I've come to rely on good autofocus so much. So. What's happened in some of the bigger sensor areas though? Like let's jump into hybrids. So for example, this is the year that we were looking forward to. Actually, every year we were looking forward to an A7S3. This is like the most rumored camera for years. It was at least like, it feels like it was at least a year late because we already had gotten to the Mark III. We'd passed the Mark III in terms of A7 III. Yeah. So I think they were holding back so they could deliver everything. And I mean, they really did. Like, now that it's been out for a while, is there anything big that we were missing from it?
No, like using that camera, it's not as sharp a video as some of the super sampled cameras, but I'm not a big sharpness aficionado. Like it's just a great tool that really is reliable. Like that's what I really loved with it. The autofocus is really nice on it. I do wish the IBIS was a bit better, but the one thing not many people are talking about that was really great for me is just how fast that sensor reads out. Like you were saying with the Komodo having a global shutter, it's just a different aesthetic. And, it's not a global shutter on the S3, but it's pretty close.
Global-ish.
That rolling shutter is very minimal unless you're doing whip pans past fences. and I do love the look of that. It's something when I'm shooting on like the S1H, like right now. Yeah, I certainly avoid doing whip pans, but even if I'm doing a walk and talk or something like that, that rolling shutter does still give it a kind of amateurish look. So
Right.
I was very excited to see that.
The price on it though, so we're looking at $3,500, right? So now we're into like, this is for professionals. Like most people buying this are doing it for work. I'd be disappointed if I was like a normal person. I was like, I want a hybrid camera that's good at video and photo. I haven't recommended this to anybody that doesn't do that isn't going to dig deep into their camera, because like you're going to be disappointed with the stills. And a lot of the best things about this come with understanding. 10-bit is for people that are going to grade. If you're not going to shoot in some form of S-Log, does it really matter that it's 10-bit? Like your image probably isn't going to break anyway. This was actually a conversation happening in Discord the other day, which if anybody wants to join it, there is a Discord that there are links to all over the place. But we were talking about 8-bit cameras not actually having that many issues for people that don't grade, which I always forget there are people like that out there. Like I grade everything. Almost everything is shot in log, except right now we're using Rec 709. But most of the time, I always plan on converting a log into a Rec 709 image. So it needs to be able to hold up to that really heavy processing that's going to happen. But 10-bit just doesn't matter in my books if you're not doing that. It will eventually matter for things like proper HDR, HLG, HLG.
Yeah, real
recording.
HLG, not Sony HLG.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, Sony was doing this 8-bit HLG, which like is something.
It falls apart. It's really tough.
It does fall apart. I was shooting with it for a while and I've regretted it. That was what led me to sell my A7 III, was like my colors were getting weird. So
yeah. We have great cameras, but I often shoot 8-bit, especially like whenever you see a thing where we're running multicam on it, like our best and worst episodes or our recent predictions episode. I just use a nice 709 profile, shoot at 8-bit. It's very, I can do a minor color adjustment in post if I have to, or tweak the contrast. But if you're just going to kind of shoot and share, then don't pay attention to 10-bit as a real headline spec. You want to be grading that footage to take advantage of it at all.
Yeah, for sure. So, well, a good example of when you may not need to grade, somebody in the chat was just mentioning the Fuji X-T4, that was my most underrated camera of the year, because I didn't even do a review of it. I was able to borrow one right when it came out, and I tested it, and I loved it, and then I just didn't really talk about it that much. But I was really happy with it. Like, that is an example where I feel like you may not be making a big compromise by just shooting straight to card and using whatever it is that you shot. Obviously, you can't get that same dynamic range. Here's a general question. Actually, can you answer this? Because it doesn't make any sense to me. Why can't you shoot in Rec 709 that has all the dynamic range of a transformed log image? So if a camera can capture log, why can't it just internally be like, okay, I'm going to do the work for you, where inside the camera, first I'm using log and then I'm applying a LUT to it, and it is now transformed into a high dynamic range, 8-bit Rec 709 full contrast image. All the Rec 709 profiles, like, just throw away all of that highlight data.
Yeah.
It's something about the order of operations, it feels like. I don't really know what it is, but that's the reason I never shoot Rec 709. Like, the colors can look amazing. Some of them are really beautiful, but like when I see highlights clipping, I'm like, well, why would I choose to throw away these, this gross bit of highlight data that I don't know. Like, am I crazy? Why isn't this possible?
No. So, essentially what's happening is you only have so many bits of information allocated to every layer on your exposure. So from 0 to 100, or if you're shooting HDR, it's larger than that. And if you jam too much into the same tonal range, that's when you start getting, I always call it with the old 8-bit Panasonic's wax face, where there's just no information there. And you find that a lot if you take, a very wide dynamic range image, and it's not utilizing all that contrast. The area that you have captured gets very muddy very quickly. So they try to capture it so it's using the full range in the log. And then if you stretch it back out in post, it's still allocated that color information through kind of a wider dynamic range thing, where if it was just 709 and it captured log, most of your usable information would be kind of jammed into that middle bit there, and we'd start losing color information, especially 8-bit. That's less of a concern.
Excuses for the camera company? That's what it sounds like to me. I mean, I don't know. Like, you know what? There has to be a reason. Like, otherwise, why wouldn't everybody just be doing this? That, like, you know, whatever it is you output looks as good as a transformed log image. Maybe it's that, like, the processor just can't work that fast to both, like, capture a log image and then instantly apply an effect on top of it. I don't know. I don't get it. It's anyway, feature request.
That's why we want compressed raw video to get its act together right now. So we never have to think about log or anything like that again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Talking about Canon though, because that was where I spent all my year looking at, right? So I really loved the R6. Was the first one that I reviewed. I was super happy with it for everything, for stills and for video, and just everything it could do was fantastic. Then the R5 is pretty similar, which I was also able to spend that time testing it out. And the C70, those are the cans I want to talk about. But let's start with the hybrid ones. I'm still really frustrated by C-Log, which I realize anybody that's not transforming log doesn't care. But it really does clip the highlights a lot. It does not have the same dynamic range as C-Log 3, or especially not C-Log 2. And it's really weird to me that Canon hasn't been able to add those already. Sony came out with it like straight out of the gate. A7S3 had them built in. But it's like, it's a huge compromise to me. They're 10-bit images now. They could be graded. These cameras should look as good as the C70, and they don't.
Yeah, like, that sensor is...
Why did that happen?
That sensor is so good. Well, and it's interesting because the last time I was on, I said, I just shot with the R6 the other day in the mountains, and the C-Log fell apart in that really high contrast situation. That video is now live. It's our Z7 II review. And if you look at the comments, people are like, why in some of those mountain scenes, like, or some of the colors and the skin tones falling apart and things like that. And it's because that is not a very good log profile for, frankly, anything, especially a sensor that's that capable. Right. So I know Canon has said, you know, C-Log 3 is coming, but we know the sensor can even outperform that. It is really frustrating when you look at something like the A7S3 or like the Panasonic S5 we talked about on the show, or even like Fuji, the X-T4 is a sensor that's half that size. Not to mention the C70 sensor is half that size, and they're giving you way more dynamic range, actually giving you what that sensor is capable of.
Well, and something that was crazy with, basically Sony's just been throwing it onto every camera that can or can't handle it. They just don't think twice about it. On Canon's side, I wonder what happened with the Magic Lantern team that used to do these incredible mods for the 5D, and like every older Canon basically would get a Magic Lantern upgrade so that like some of them could shoot like raw and 10-bit and log and all this crazy stuff. And I can only imagine what that would look like on the modern Canons. Like if they applied that to an R5, it would just start destroying everything. Like, I'm sure it could shoot raw C-Log 2. Like it could, of course, it can do all of this stuff. It's in there. Anyway, they're just throwing it away. And
well, if you hand grade the R5's raw footage, it's spectacular. Like you can really push it beautifully, just like working with a Red or something like that. But if you use transform LUTs on it, again, you're still not getting what it's capable of because it wasn't designed for a sensor like that.
No matter what. Yeah. Okay, so that brings me to my favorite camera, C70. Delivered
I touched it the other day.
Most things. Oh, so you haven't shot it with it? Okay, that's good.
I haven't shot, but I did go into the camera store and they had a body there, and it felt great. Super well built, but no, I haven't actually gotten a chance to use it yet. I'm pushing. I really want to review this camera.
Well, so it's one of the really key things is that they just didn't hold back on those extra video features. I mean, like when I think about it, the first thing that is most important compared to the R5 and R6 is that it shoots C-Log 2. Like, other than that, like it's not, oh no, wait, there is a very significant difference that I don't want to pass. And this was a big theme of 2020 is all of a sudden these Canon cameras having formats that are impossible to edit on computers and that basically need to be transcoded. I didn't see that coming. Like, that was a bit of a twist in camera announcements. It's like, okay, you thought you bought a fast computer that you can edit 4K. That's great. We're about to take that same footage and suddenly make it really painfully slow.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell? We all mention it in our reviews. Like, it's a passing thing. It's like, oh, but just so you know, it does slow down your computer. But that has to keep getting emphasized because it affects your workflow. Like, it's not nothing. Have you done like a series of projects on any of these slower codec Canons? Like, you edited a lot.
Well, yeah. Again, I just did an R6 project. Right. And it is, I've got a 3-year-old 15-inch MacBook Pro here, and it's a slideshow, basically, until I started applying a grade. It converted it over to ProRes, and it was usable again. But when I'm trying to make that initial cut and actually hit my timing, I'm basically editing to audio exclusively because it's a slideshow on it. I mean, it looks like that's going to be much more usable once we get some of the new, once I get my M1 16-inch MacBook Pro or whatever they wind up using for that, because that seems to handle H.265 very well. But I feel like Canon had such a backlash with their uncompressed motion JPEG on the 5D4 and, the what was it? Not the C1, the 1DC. They're like, okay, we're going to give you small file sizes and break your computer and show you why we were right in the first place.
This doesn't have to happen, though. Like, I get it. I know you're saying that's the story, but if you go pick up a C70, that footage works better. And I don't know why.
It's still... I think it's still H.264 based. Again, I haven't pushed the files through that. But like, say, with the Sony A7S3, it also has the option of H.265 compression, and it's just as difficult to edit as the Canon stuff. But that camera still gets you the option to shoot higher data rate, H.264, but 10-bit 422 with that. So the files are bigger in the camera, but it cuts just like any other 8-bit 4K footage. It's a dream to work with. And Canon's just not giving you that option in the R6 and the R5. It's frustrating, and it makes me think they're just trying to push you to the cinema series again.
Well, and their history of this with things like having motion JPEG, like the MJPEG stuff on the 5D, like, that was trash. And I know there's people, like, I talked to Justin C about this because he was shooting on the 1DX, like, a lot of his video for a while. And he's like, yeah, it's kind of tough because, shooting 4K to these, is it CFast 2 or is it? Yeah. Right?
Yeah, CFast on that.
Yeah, and it's like it fills a whole card in a few minutes, but like, oh, it's worth it because the image looks good. I'm like, no, you shouldn't put up with that. Like, the size of those files, the problem is the files are enormous, but the data isn't going to something useful. Like, to me, having extra data in a file is about like, if you're shooting 12-bit or 10-bit, so that when you transform the log footage, it has more color information to pass through, or like what are you worried about, right? What kind of compression is negative to you? Obviously, color compression can give you really ugly, like, macro blocking. That's something we've all seen, something we've all run into. And even on like a smaller scale, there's all sorts of places where colors fall apart, banding. Those are common compression issues. You can also run into things that look like JPEG compression, right? Like artifacts. That's another type of compression that can look ugly. I find it's less visible. Like, I never see that on more expensive cameras. To me, that only really appears on smaller sensors, drone footage, that like over sharpened, very compressed look. But like, what are you gaining from really big file sizes like that, like MJPEG, which this has kind of been the past.
Well, motion JPEG, nothing. Yeah.
Yeah. There's no better image quality from those bigger file sizes. And I don't really know what's going on with the modern era of Canon codecs, but like, it's a real problem. If you're like telling people like, oh, just buy a new computer is not an answer. Like, I'm not buying a new computer with every new camera I buy. So I don't know. This is like a bigger strike against Canon than I usually remember to give them flack for. But since we're talking about it.
Well, on the S1H that's filming me right now, they give you the option of 400 megabit per second all-I or 150 megabit per second compressed. It's the exact same. Like, I've looked at them side by side. There's no difference in terms of highlight roll-off, the colors falling apart, anything like that. It's just that the more compressed one is a little harder on your machine, but it's still pretty easily editable on mine. And then the 400, no real quality bump there, but it is a little easier on your editing suite. So I love that they give you that option. Back in the day, like when the Canon 5D3 and stuff like that was coming out, a lot of cameras would have a lot of motion compression artifacts where you'd get like the big pixels, every time the camera panned past water or a crowd or something. But I think just everybody's gotten so good at motion compression with all the streaming video and everything like that. I haven't run into that in a camera since I think the Olympus EM1 II was the last time I really saw it. And that was 5 years ago, I think, at this point.
Totally. Well, okay, we're also still leaving out the higher end Sonys from this part of the conversation. I was really focused on the C70. That's where I've been thinking about a lot. But obviously, Sony also knocked it out of the park this year with the FX6. Still got the FX9, which was also pretty incredible. But like weird that they made it even better with the FX6, like that they added more features, and seemed to sort of, kill a lot of the market for the FX9. Yeah. I'm not looking at them at all because of my lens choices. We have so many EF lenses, which now EF on a C70 looks like it's going to be a very promising proposition because of the converter. But I don't know, like what are your feelings about the Sony lineup right now? Like, are you losing a lot by choosing the Canon? Obviously, Sony's always got like the longer list of features that are available. Same with the FX6 right now. From what I've seen in other reviews, not having tested it, it's still got all the usability issues that we're used to. So that's another strike against it. But
yeah, I loved the FS5, the precursor to the FX6. We shot on that for years. But they made almost no progress and actually a few steps backwards in terms of usability with that. Like the whole time I'm shooting with it, because it's the same sensor as a A7S3, I just wanted an A7S3 back again with a really great viewfinder and some IBIS, and a more intuitive menu, like all of that. Usability is just where they're really struggling on Sony, because the quality from that's wonderful. It's, all the compression options, everything like that. It's a super flexible tool. But just the other day playing with the C70, I was like, I want to go out and shoot with this right now, where both Chris and I were kind of frustrated using the FX6, except that I have to say electronic variable ND filter is the best thing ever. I want it on every camera, but it's still only on a few Sony models. It speeds everything up. And what's funny with that FX6 is it seems like it's built for more deliberate shooting. We said in our review, like this feels like it's built to be used with a crew, but that variable ND filter is a dream for one-man band solo shooters. Like you can just set it in auto ND, lock your shutter angle where you want it, choose the aperture you want creatively, and in bright light, it does a beautiful job of controlling exposure. But it's on a camera that doesn't work very well for one-man band run and gun shooting. So It just feels a little confused to me.
Yeah, I kind of thought we were going to get that variable ND thing everywhere when it showed up in the FS5. It's just like, it's so like beautiful and perfect. It's like, oh, this is just a future feature that everything will get. I don't know. I also kind of thought maybe hybrid cameras would start getting NDs by this point. Mm-hmm. Is that just me? Like, is this never going to happen? Am I holding on to a useful, like, I obviously bodies need to get bigger to fit an ND into it. But it's also a big part of my decision to go with, let's say, the C70 over the red Komodo, which I've talked about a lot. I loved the Komodo. This is my other favorite. Another genre that we were kind of ignoring is the whole Blackmagic world, because a lot of people choose to go in that direction. But that is a big reason for me that I ignore those. In the Blackmagic case, it's actually about scaling up the camera that I don't want to do. I don't want to have to be worrying about NDs and tons of extra batteries and like external recording solutions. I want my camera to be the camera. I don't really want to have to bolt a bunch of other stuff on it to get pretty basic functionality out of it, or just to be able to use it in the same way that other cameras are very usable. So even then, again, that was like parts of why I'm leaning towards C70 over Komodo. Way less batteries. Like the battery life on Komodo is good, especially for red. So I don't know, kind of weird to complain about, but just in practical terms, it means that I can shoot way more in a day with just one battery on, and not worrying about like changing and charging. It's like 2 Komodo batteries are going to last less time than 1 Canon battery. And then in the world of Blackmagic, from what I've heard, I don't shoot them, but it's even worse. So
it's brutal. Yeah. Well, and the thing too is you travel a lot, and so theoretically one day we will be traveling again.
In theory, yeah.
And yeah, I love the image from a Blackmagic camera. I could never use one for my work because it would take a separate, checked bag for all the accessories to make it really a pleasure to work with on a shoot day. Where the C70, yeah, throw a couple of those little A30 batteries in and the glass you need, and you basically have a full shooting setup with it. Even better than a C200 or something like that.
Yeah, but it's obviously the reason people go for the Blackmagics is price. So we've got to give them some credit there as well. It's like I can look at those Blackmagic rigs and be like, oh my God, that would just be so frustrating. But it's really affordable to get into a price point where all of a sudden you're making stuff that looks as good, like it looks cinema, right? There's no visual downside. They look awesome. $2,000 and you're cruising. But you do have to buy the accessories, right? Like it is not just the price of entry. Whereas if I just buy the Canon, I'm good to go. Or the Sony, FX6 or C70, you're just shooting. Like you really can just stop shopping at that point. I mean, none of us stop shopping, but you could in theory just have a few lenses and go. That's not going to happen with a Blackmagic rig. You're always like looking for the right extension arm to hold your hard drive, to add a bigger V-mount battery or whatever it is you're going to be doing, and yeah, that constant need to build on it is like, that's a cost. You know what I mean? Like over the 2 or 3 years, 4 or 5 years, you might use that one camera. Like how much does it cost you in time, constantly looking for new stuff, and also just in money and, buying these little accessories that you may not need on the next camera that you buy. I don't know. Things to consider when you look at saving money is like how much money really, really do you end up saving in the end if you put a lot more into the accessory size.
Well, so many people grabbing those Blackmagic cameras are film school students. And in that case, grab a Blackmagic because now everybody's swapping accessories to actually make those cameras usable. But if you're going to wind up using it on your own, just be prepared. It's going to be double to triple the investment in the camera to get it into something that you could use to show up at a gig and be confident you are going to get through the shoot day successfully.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, if you're going to learn with it, keep it affordable. If you're going to shoot it in the real world, be prepared for investing more than you might have expected. One also note about Blackmagic that I think doesn't get talked about enough. The dynamic range isn't the same as cameras it gets compared to. So you'll see a lot of comparisons to like a Red Komodo. You also see this same goes for Zcam Blackmagic. They'll get compared to Reds and Alexas or whatever, like other raw cameras, or even comparing it to an FX6 or a C70. They don't have the same dynamic range as those cameras. Like you can see it as soon as there's a shot side by side where like a cloud has a little too much sun in it. There's just a hard clip on Blackmagic. The overall colors are beautiful. Like Blackmagic's color science is, it's coming from Resolve, of course. Like they did a great job, and it's easy to make the colors look beautiful. And that's why a lot of Blackmagic stuff looks like full cinema. It doesn't look like you're making any compromises in terms of image quality. It's very sharp as well. But when it clips, it does look like video. It doesn't have that smooth roll off of a Red or of an Alexa. And that's a lot of the reason that it's in that same price point. It just, you can see it when it starts to fall apart. What I see in the C70 and the FX6 is that like those log profiles, they have a lot smoother roll off to me. I don't know about like measurable dynamic range, but that's not even the most important thing. A lot of the time it's just like, does the roll off look like video or does it look like, film? I guess,
Yeah, exactly. I've really stopped paying attention to dynamic range ratings from manufacturers. I just go out and shoot it on a bright day and see if I like the image that comes back from it. And it's not specifically just like highlight roll off, but if it's prioritizing too much data to the highlights, are those, midtones going to get muddy, things like that. And, I think Blackmagic definitely, they shoot for the midtones. They have beautiful skin, but it sacrifices in the highlights. Talking to Panasonic about it, they said like, okay, there's, Blackmagic, there's Zcam, and us all using the same sensor on it, but we're all getting completely different measurable dynamic range. So they're all shooting raw. So, there is stuff going on under the hood where these manufacturers are prioritizing how it's going to pan out.
Yeah, like I also feel like this is partly our fault, like the YouTube community of the way that tests happen. Like I've been looking at, every day I'm searching for dynamic range tests of C70 because, it's my new camera that will eventually show up. And I'm like, I want to know everything about it before it arrives. But when I see people do these tests, a lot of the time it's like, there are circumstances that clip your highlights on a regular basis, especially outdoors. And I don't think everybody understands what dynamic range means in practical terms. Like they do know what it means. They're not dummies. But like a lot of shots I see, I'm like, nothing would have clipped here either way. Like both cameras look the same because neither of them are having a hard clip where you would see that edge. So I don't know. This is my moment to call out other YouTubers. But like, guys, when we do our tests, make sure every time you test dynamic range, there is some part of the subject that has a bunch of color information, and preferably both color and detail. And it is definitely clipped. It is past 100, and preferably as well that you can see the roll off into it. So that's why, like, a really good example all the time is like clouds when your subject is kind of dark, because like the way that the light's going to hit one part of the cloud will be brighter than other parts. And if the subject, I don't know. It happens to me all the time. And then sometimes when I'm looking for examples, nobody has shot those common examples that do cause clipping. So,
well, that's why I put that's why these curtains are back here, Tyler, so you can easily
actually, that is a good example. Yeah,
the 8-bit 709 roll off, and it's not great, frankly.
Well,
Midtones,
okay.
though, not bad at all.
Not the purpose of this video today, but okay. So we're going into 2021. What have we figured anything out right now? I mean, we just did the best of 2020 podcasts, so we probably solved all our problems there. But let's solve them again right now. Best entry level video camera.
I'm going to say ZV1.
Yeah, that's the only one I can really choose as well. What's the cost before we move past Fuji's too fast? Like, what's the cost comparison? Because I just don't know off the top of my head. How much are the like lower end? Is there a Fuji that could possibly compete? There's the one you liked that was under $1,000.
Yeah, well, the XS10 I loved. That's $1,000. It's a wonderful camera. Not 10-bit, but if you're shooting the Eterna profile, which is my favorite straight out of camera profile, that's a great way to go. The 8-bit doesn't fall apart at all on it. The autofocus is good. It can overheat, but it's actually not as prone to overheating as its big brother, the XT4. So for some of those longer clips, I would be comfortable shooting multiple 20-minute clips, things like that. But if you need long record time, might not be the way to go. But ergonomics on it are great. It's a sweet little camera.
Yeah, I mean, I tried the XT4. I didn't try this, but yeah, I mean, Fuji's the dark horse all year round. Okay, what if we look at the kind of mid range, something between like $2,000 and $5,000? I'm thinking Sony takes it again with the A7S III. Like,
yep.
It's not what I'd be buying. Like, I've been on the Canon train, love the R5, the R6, but the A7S III is just like, it just ticks every box, especially if video is your world.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I do love, I've got a video coming out here. Once I've shot the S3 a little bit more, we're going to shoot out against the S1H, which is kind of the other benchmark for a hybrid video mirrorless camera. But if autofocus is important to you, I do think the S3 is just a better option at this point. And I do love the lack of rolling shutter, but the S1H, it's got anamorphic support, waveforms, vector scopes. Like it's a high-end video tool in a, kind of consumer form factor, but also totally worth checking. Hey, that's the exact combo that's filming me right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, I feel like, I don't know, I'd be very curious to see sales of how Panasonic ends up doing relative to everyone else, because like people I personally know shoot less Panasonic, but maybe that's just, selection bias because I shoot Canon. So I'd love to know, like, how are they performing relative to everyone else? I know less. I know, like, Sony and Canon are leading the pack for the last few years, but, and then if we move to the high end, so you're spending $5,000 to $15,000, let's make this a pretty big range because, like, whatever. If you're doing professional stuff, that range doesn't matter quite as much because you're getting paid from it. We've got options like C70, we've got the FX6, we've got the Red Komodo, Blackmagic's still around, Panasonic's got something or other. I don't know. Where would you be looking?
Well, this one's a real it depends kind of situation, because if I were doing, higher end commercial work or filmmaking, the Komodo is I think it's going to be pretty ubiquitous. Like, it's just a beautiful picture. Having a global shutter, I always wanted to shoot with a Sony F55, but it was expensive and pretty outdated in a lot of ways. This just looks fantastic. But, again, for someone who's traveling or needs something that they can kind of run and gun, that C70 just looks like a nearly perfect camera. I just wish it had an EVF on it. I know I'm in the minority that I love shooting video with an electronic viewfinder, but other than that, it just having that great autofocus, which the Komodo does have autofocus, and it seems to do an okay job, but it's nowhere near as sophisticated as what Canon's doing.
Well, and one more knock against the C70 is the lack of good grip options. Like, I know you're supposed to hold it a certain way because it has a built-in grip. Just that isn't the angle that in reality anybody really shoots at. Like, you don't hold the camera up to your eye, which is how that angle aligns with a hand.
Yeah.
If you're hand holding, it's typically more towards your like chest or stomach. Like, it's a little bit lower, and that like often can create a weird angle to, if you want to look upwards, your wrist is now twisted. So usually you'd have a top handle. Canon's top handles suck. Like,
They've always been terrible. Yeah.
I don't use them. They're gone as soon as I get the camera. And just something about the design of this feels like it's not meant for a top handle. I don't know. So it's like the grip stuff is a little weird, and putting a side grip on top of another grip is a little like, there already is a grip, so you wouldn't really add more to the side. Whereas with the Komodo, it starts off as a little box that is very comfortable to hold like a Hasselblad. And then if you start adding handles to it, they can make a little bit more sense, I think. So, I don't know. That's if I can say anything bad about the C70 without owning it yet, there's one knock against it. And then obviously Sony, usability sucks, image is great. So
yeah, for most people, I would still say get an S3 would be except I do have to say, have you ever used a camera that shoots Sony's S-Cinetone?
No, I haven't used it. I mean, I've seen it, and
it's so good.
Tell me more. I mean, it's like the Eterna of Sony, right?
It really is. Yeah, I would say, I said in our video, it was my second favorite color profile. My issue with Sony's has always been that you're basically shooting log and really working those files. Or, we've had the discussion about picture profiles for straight out of camera quite a few times. I use Cine 2 all the time, but I was never thrilled with it. I don't like the color. I don't like the contrast on it nearly as much as other ones. But S-Cinetone, I just dropped it into my editing suite, maybe sometimes tweaked the contrast a bit, but mostly it was good to go. So I want that on their mirrorless cameras. It's just a color profile, but it's really, really nice. It's nice to know they have that secret sauce now.
Well, Sony's watching this, I'm sure, so I'm sure they're on it.
Yeah.
Jordan, thanks for joining me on this, and it was great chatting with you.
This was fun, man.